Welcome to my RPG devlog series. In this devlog, I'll be going over the creation of my randomized loot system, as well as some pretty big updates to items that are on the ground. I started day 44 off working on the randomized loot system. This system would pick items from a list and spawn them when the enemy dies. So I started with how I would represent those items in the list. Each item would be represented by a chip. That chip would contain the data that represents the item. The main two pieces of data in that chip would be the ID and the amount or the enchantment data. I say the amount or the enchantment data because it can only be one or the other. It can't be both. And that's pretty much all that's needed for this chip. But of course, the data is then combined into a combiner and then output through a node. But that's all we need for this chip. The rest of the system is what's the most important in my opinion. It's choosing which chip's data to use. So how do you now take one of these chips? Remember, each chip represents one item, so maybe we have like 3 chips in this system. How do we take one of those? How do we randomly take one of those, right? Your first thought would probably be a randomizer, but that's not, in my opinion, the correct way to go about this, because you would not easily be able to weight the different chips. For example, what if you wanted, let's say we have 3 items again. What if you wanted one item to be very common, like a 70% chance to drop, and then the other 2 pretty rare, so like 20 and 10? You could not easily do that with a randomizer. But you could with a timeline. How would you do this with a timeline? So with a timeline, for each item in the loot table, you would put one node in the timeline. Make sure the nodes don't overlap, so that wherever the playhead is, the playhead will be only turning on one node, and whichever node is turned on is the item that is selected. Each item would pass its data through one of the nodes, and again, whichever node is turned on, that data would be allowed all the way through. The reason this is so powerful is because you're able to change the weight, how likely one of the items is to be chosen, based on how much space the node takes up in the timeline. And to actually choose one of the items randomly, all you would need to do is randomize the playhead position. So you would create a random number from 0 to 1, and then set the playhead to that random number. The other part of this system is spawning multiple items, right? So what I described works great for one, but what if you wanted to spawn multiple? And the way you would do that is basically every time it spawns one, it would wait until that item spawned, and then it would re-randomize and then spawn another one. You can't spawn all of them at the same time. Every time this happens, it counts a counter up, and then once that counter hits the max, the target, right, the target items spawned, it destroys the chip, and that's how it works. Once I finished that, I wanted to actually set what items would spawn. I wanted to spawn one of each type of item, just for testing purposes. So an enchantable item, which ended up being the test sword with 1 sharp enchantment. A stackable item, so I chose a stack of logs, and just a normal item, so neither stackable or enchantable. So I just chose the piece of paper item. It did not work on the very first try. In fact, it took about 5 tries to get it to actually spawn something, and it ended up working finally, but a pretty funny bug happened where basically the items were spawning so fast that they spawned inside of each other and exploded. So that was cool. But after 7 different fixes, I did finally get it working. That's pretty cool.
shit.
With the randomized loot system done, pretty much, I wanted to add another item. This item would be called Corruption Essence, name possibly work in progress. But the idea is that it's the stuff that is corrupting these enemies, and it's what's left over once you kill them. From a game design standpoint, I want this item to give the player, to be a way that the player can generate gold currency. I don't want to call it gold yet because I don't know if it's actually going to be called gold. Anyway, so basically it drops very often. It's stackable, so it's not going to take up your inventory that much. And it'll be worth a decent amount so you can sell it to vendors. This specific item is called Lesser Corruption Essence, with the intention of making a greater Corruption Essence or something like that. Something more rare that only is dropped from harder to kill enemies that is worth more. Then I added it to the log enemies loot table, so now when you kill the log enemy, there's a chance that it will drop the Lesser Corruption Essence. And then I started thinking about how items stacked on each other when they were dropped on the ground.
These objects obviously are like stacked on top of each other. Picking, like you can't, there's no way to like cycle through them. Oh, you can jump.
Before monsters could drop items, the only way items would stack on each other like this is if the player dropped them. And I just kind of thought it was a funny interaction. But now that monsters could drop items, I realized how bad this actually was. The player had literally no way to choose what they wanted to pick up. You just had to keep picking stuff up until you got what you wanted and then go into your inventory and drop what you didn't want, which is just horrible. It's a horrible gameplay. So there were two solutions. One, give the player the ability to cycle through what they were, like all the items they were near to pick which one they wanted, or just completely prevent items from stacking up in the first place. And I went with the latter. My first idea was to make the hitboxes, instead of prisms, cones, right? Because if they're cones, the top is pointy, and the items would land on the pointy top and fall to the sides. And that kind of worked, but the flat bottoms of the cones made it way too easy for them to stack. So I tried spheres, and we had the exact same issue, but I was on the right track. I realized that the reason they weren't sliding off of each other was because of the friction. But you can't really just make the friction low always, or they'll just slide around on the ground forever. So what I did was set the friction to basically 0. Actually, I'm pretty sure that's what I set it to. And then once it collided with scenery, which is anything that's the ground, basically, anything labeled scenery, I would keyframe the friction back to normal. And this ended up working extremely well. It's not perfect, and I probably could tweak it more, but I'm very happy with how it turned out.
I mean,
we finished the stream off with trying to create item indicator lines. When I was testing the loot dropping, the items were kind of hard to see with all the enemy body parts laying around. It was just hard to tell what was an item and what was not. So I wanted to add little lines of like light that basically showed where the items were on the ground. I'm sure you've seen it in other games, so you probably know what I'm talking about. In Dreams, in really just anything, it's hard to make something when you don't know what you're trying to make. I had this idea in my head, but I didn't have a concrete vision of it. So I basically just flailed around for like a half hour with no idea what I was doing. I tried making this line with like a sculpt. I kind of knew the sculpt wasn't gonna work. I just wanted to see what it would look like. It might have worked, who knows? So then, of course, I tried with strokes, and it wasn't looking good. I'm not gonna lie, it wasn't looking good. But then I just tried something, and I just stumbled upon the exact order of operations to get this really, really good looking item line indicator thing. I am so happy with how this turned out, seriously. So I'm actually going to show the full process of me making this and then live commentate over it. I start with placing one stroke and then copying it and then placing another stroke and enlarging it. But before I place it, I press left D-pad a bunch of times to make clones in the middle. I do that again with a middle section that's the same thickness, and then I do it again with a lower section that gets thick to thin. So I have this like shape, right? It goes from thin to thick, thick in the middle, then thick to thin. I animate in sequence, and I make the animation speed kind of high, and I turned up pulse, and then I'm getting attacked by a cat. But anyway, yeah, I turned it up really, really high. I'm not sure if I keep that though. I turn it back down. I don't need the animation speed high. What I do though, first, is clone in rotation. So yeah, I clone around a circle. And then here's the really important part. I think it's coming up here. Oh, okay. I do scale jitter, but I think I decide against scale jitter. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I put the clones to about 20%. I turn down wave, and the heartbeat one, or the throb, I believe makes it look perfect. I turn that up, and that is the exact effect I want. I don't know why it looks like that, but it does. It has this, like, it almost looks like it's rotating. And it's almost like a really thin seashell. I try some other stuff, but it doesn't really work out. Throb at 70% made this look so good. And then I just adjust the brightness and the opacity, and that's pretty much it. I'm so happy I stumbled upon this because it turned out so good. You can see in the background, my past try, it kind of looks like steam or something. Yeah, anyway, this is so much better. But yeah, hey, if you're looking for some sort of like indicator effect, this is the way to go. And here is what it looks like. It's not too overwhelming, but it also doesn't blend in too much. I think it's just right. But you can really appreciate it when the items are in piles and piles of enemy body parts. you know where the items are, and it's a very, very nice touch. It's a very nice quality of life feature. That's it for this devlog, guys. I really hope you enjoyed the video. I mean, if you made it this far, you probably did enjoy the video. So if you did, a like would be appreciated. The more people that see these videos, the better for me, at least, and for this project. If you really want to support me, consider joining the channel. I would really appreciate it. And don't miss my streams. I'm streaming on YouTube. You'll know when I'm live because, well, it'll say I'm live. To make sure you don't miss me, turn on notifications. But anyway, guys, yeah, that's it for now. I'll leave you with some gameplay. Have a nice rest of your day. Okay, that's slightly awkward how it bounced so far away, but I mean, it is what it is, I guess. All the loot. So much loot. I love it.